My name is Manfredo Capriolo. Now I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oslo at the Center for Earth Evolution and Dynamics, working on a project that is called MAPLES, with project leader Sara Callegaro. This project is about the interaction between magma and sediments. My PhD in geosciences was here at the University of Padua at the Department of Geosciences, and was about the activity of the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, which is coincident with the end-Triassic mass extinction. In particular, the topic of my thesis was about the carbon cycle and the carbon involved in this process, since the gassing of carbon species, such as carbon dioxide and methane, are really impacting the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and biota. So the linking between magmatic activity and mass extinction events is to research in the degassing of these carbon species. In particular, my PhD thesis was supervised by Professor Marzoli at the University of Padua and Professor Newton at the University of Leeds, United Kingdom. And this thesis was about three different parts. The first part of my PhD thesis was about the carbon dioxide that was degassed by the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province. The investigation of this volatile was research in microstructures at the size of microns within crystals within the rocks deriving from the basaltic lava flows of this event. In this picture, it's possible to observe a melt inclusion with two different bubbles. Melt inclusions are micrometer-sized imperfections in the crystals that preserve part of the volatiles that were degassed during the magmatic activity. In these bubbles was observed the presence of carbon dioxide using a particular technique that is Raman microspectroscopy, which is based on the interaction between a laser, so a light source, and the matter. The second part of my PhD thesis was about the investigation of methane that was preserved by other similar structures, microstructures, that are called fluid inclusions. Fluid inclusions preserve part of the volatiles, but the difference with the previous melt inclusion is that in this case we don't have glass or crystals, so part of the melt. The only contents that was entrapped in the inclusions was the volatiles. The interesting point about this investigation is that the origin of the methane in these rocks that are not lava flows but are intrusive rocks, subvolcanic rocks, is that methane was derived by the interaction of magma and sediments during the emplacement of these structures. The third and the last part of my PhD thesis was about the Polychromatic modeling from the data of melt inclusions and other data published in the literature that allowed us to constrain the magmatic activity and the volcanic degassing of the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province. The interesting point is the similarity between a particular phase of the magmatic activity, of the volcanic degassing of the camp, with the current anthropogenic emissions. Throughout the Earth's history, many mass extinction events are coincident in time with large igneous provinces. The link between magmatic activity of the large igneous provinces and the biotic crisis is in the degassing of carbon species and other volatiles deriving from the activity and intrusion of large igneous provinces. The similarity between current anthropogenic emissions and a single pulse of the main phase of magmatic activity from the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province is in the quantity, the amount of CO2 that was degassed, and also in the period that was previously thought to be larger, but there are many constraints from magnetostratigraphy and other data previously published in the literature that constrain this activity in a range of 400 years. That is similar to the activity of the current anthropogenic emissions from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. For our Polychromatic model, we used a biogeochemical box model that is structured in three different boxes, one for the atmosphere, one for the crust, and one that is split into three different for the deep ocean, high latitude ocean, and low latitude ocean. The results we obtained for the camp activity, for the pulses of the main phase of camp activity, are that the atmospheric CO2 concentration raised up, causing also ocean acidification with pH drops up to about 0.2 logarithmic units, and also the increase of temperature with global warming up to about 5 Celsius degrees. For our model, we tested different scenarios in order to try to test different hypothetical situations for the degassing of carbon from the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province. Well, we modeled just the first phase, which is the main phase, is the most voluminous, and also the one that is synchronous with the first extinction peak. The different scenarios take into account different details. For example, we tested different number of pulses, different duration of each pulse, different volumes of the gas carbon, but also different isotopic signature for the gas carbon, and also different CO2 concentration for the baseline at the end-Triassic. So this was the third and last part of the PhD thesis, and from all the three parts we obtained data that enrich our comprehension and understanding of the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province in terms of speciation of the volatile carbon phases that were degassed, and also the impact of the carbon degassing in the end-Triassic, which was, as I said, synchronous with the end-Triassic mass extinction. It's fundamental also for nowadays, because today we are experiencing the increase of atmospheric CO2, and global climate change is observed by everybody. And to understand the past is fundamental to foresee and prevent the future.